Warlord, Saga of the Storm, Into the Accordlands, Story number 16, The River, by Graham Moyer. Humiliating her cousin at the Nothrog village had gone about as well as Tasian could have hoped. True, Baelius's pride had been stung, but Baelius also had the kind of political strength in the Dythanis court that Tasian could only dream of. He was going to make her suffer, to be sure, to remind her that he held the power in their relationship, especially when her knife wasn't at his throat. On the other hand, Tasian knew that Baelius had larger concerns than her. The court was a viper's nest of politics and betrayal as the Lich King Kulis's various descendants tried to position themselves around him. Aspirants had to fight for every advantage, and now Baelius knew something no one else at court did, that his distant cousin in the provinces could fight. Baelius would try to use her, form a partnership that could increase both of their standings. Which is why Tasian hadn't been surprised when new orders came from the forest to her outpost in Calden. The Silver Steel Company is driving too far up the river Lareia, marauding through the ancestral lands of Lord Velen Barrow. He has requested assistance. Rendezvous with Barrow at White Keep. Make an example of these mercenaries. Await further instruction. So Tasian had packed up her command tent and led her host to the shores of Lake Amanad. She'd razed several Nothrog fishing villages before she'd found enough ships to transport her force of cutthroats, necromancers, and undead abominations. But she'd come to these lands to study Nothrog and did not regret the delay. She crossed the waters with difficulty. Lake Amanad was home to scores of pirates, human, dwarven, Nothrog, Golden Grove. The straits past the ruins of Baraxton were swarming with Liberty Raiders, and the entrance to the river guarded by the Silver Steel Company's garrison at Syranis. Any of them could easily have shattered Tasian's ragtag fleet of fishing vessels. But Tasian kept her fleet far out and low to the water during the day, surrounded by dead things lurking under the surface, ready to signal should enemies approach. And by night, they had painted the ships and themselves black with Nothrog blood and could slip unnoticed past the coastal guards and watchtowers. Soon, she would reach White Keep. Lord Barrow regarded the pale young elf before him with chilly courtesy. His ridge bones cast his face into shadow, and the gleam of his grave eyes through the darkness had forced many an emissary into submission. But this charm-clad stripling had slipped by Retsov's patrols and had avoided the crypt beast that had been haunting him these past few months, and she was uncowed by the warlock's gaze. "Tasian Dythanis," the woman said, inclining her head ever so slightly. "They told me to come, and I'm here. Who needs killing?" "Welcome, Lady Dythanis, to White Keep." Barrow's tone made it clear how little he cared to have Tasian here. "Over the past few weeks, we've been beset by this thrice-cursed host of mercenaries. You may not be aware, but White Keep is home to one of the libraries of the original Dythanis, full of lost secrets from the old world." Barrow stopped here to allow this fact to impress the scrappy youth before him. When she gave no visible reaction, he proceeded. "The leader of these adventurers, one Colonel Retsov, seems to be searching for something in that library. Her forces attack from every direction at once and flee back to the river when challenged. During the fighting, her agents sneak into the library and jumble up everything that I've organized so carefully." Tasian looked at the imperious elf, nonplussed. "You haven't set an ambush in the library?" "Careful, girl. I am not a fool. Of course I've set traps. But the library isn't just a room. It's a veritable dungeon, huge, underground, and sprawling. Not all its depths have been plumbed, not all its entrances discovered. Much of it is in disrepair. Of course, I apply to King Kulis for funds, but he sends me—" Barrow trailed off as he gestured vaguely at Tasian. "Still, my schemes have not been entirely fruitless." Barrow snapped his fingers, and a body, bound and gagged, appeared in thin air and fell to the floor with a thump. The man was slender, with bulging black eyes and no lips to speak of. He had a vaguely greenish look, with a suggestion of scales under his skin. One of Retsov's lieutenants. Tazian's eyes glowed a feral burnt orange, and she bent to inspect the body. Half Sutek? I didn't know it was possible. My lord, she said, not looking at Barrow, running her hands over the captive's flesh. Your problem is Retsov's ship. While she controls the river, you cannot be rid of her, and if you can't defend the library, you will eventually lose it. But I have an answer. Give me this prisoner. Let me strip him for parts, understand how he works, and show me to the section of the library closest to the riverbank. When Retsov next attacks, allow her men as far in as they will come. Get between them and the river. Buy me time, and I'll save you and your precious library. Barrow rubbed his brow, tired of dealing with Didanis' creature. She was nearly as aggravating as Retsov, and he had more important concerns. He waved his hand in acknowledgement and stalked back to his study. With any luck, they'd kill each other. The torches fluttered weakly in the oppressive darkness of White Keep's cavernous library, but the Retsov could still make out the title on the volume in front of her. Balcaris Wormeris. This was it. She picked the book up and flipped it open. She'd done it. Objective secured, she announced to her soldiers, voice low but clear. Let's get out of here. The command came not a moment too soon, as the familiar scrape of bone on stone began to echo through the blackness towards them. On the double! Maris and Skuggs led the way, with Kovan and Tassar behind. Retsov jogged between them, the book open in her hands, trying to read what she could by the wavering light of the torches. Though her hair had gone white, her eyes were as strong as ever, and she flipped hurriedly through the tome, searching for what she knew must be inside. The noises pursuing them grew louder, and a bolt of flame shot through the darkness over their heads, illuminating a gaunt, cloaked elf at the head of a horde of dead things. Lord Barrow himself had come to see them off. Retsov drew her scimitar, the book still in her other hand. Kovan whirled, dropping her torch and unsheathing her great axe. The brawny Votar woman gave Retsov a brief glance, then turned to face the oncoming horde. Go! She yelled. Barrow shot 3 bolts of purplish energy directly at her. She blocked the first with her great axe, sidestepped the second, and ducked under the third. As Kovan rose, Barrow unleashed a jet of red energy that caught the woman full on the chin. She collapsed, head thrown backwards, mouth locked in a rictus grin. The remaining 4 ran faster. The earth erupted in front of them, and a blood-red worm, as thick as Retsov's torso with a gaping maw, wrapped itself around Skuggs. Skuggs had barely begun to yell when the creature enveloped his head. Retsov jumped into action, moving like a tightly coiled spring just released. Within seconds, she'd slashed the worm in 6 places, and it collapsed to the earth in a fountain of blood. It hadn't been fast enough for Skuggs, who fell with the beast, bloodless and drained. Retsov snatched up Skuggs' torch. Maris! Tassar! Go! Retsov whirled and saw several especially dry-looking stacks of books. She held the torch to 3 in turn, waiting for a second for the parchment to begin to crackle, then whirling after her crew. A high-curdled scream followed them as they ran. No! Put it out! Put it out! Don't let it spread! That would be Barrow. Retsov went back to trying to read the tome until her group of 3 ran into Black Jorah, his quartermaster, and 3 other silver steel soldiers. Problems on the River God's Wrath, Colonel, Jorah panted. We're under attack. Xenia is leading the defense. Keep moving. What's happened? We've repulsed skeletons before. It's not hard when they're climbing up the side. Not skeletons, Jorah panted. Elves. Elves with some sort of fleshy breathing masks. Elves shooting out of the water propelled by tentacles of dead flesh. At that moment, the group emerged from the depths of the library, within sight of the river. The lanterns on the river god were the only source of light, but they were enough. The deck was stained with blood. Armored silver steel soldiers were being dumped into the river, and bone-clad elves were battering down the door to the forecastle. A lone elven woman stood on the railing, clad in bone trinkets, and her orange eyes found Retsov on the shore. Smiling, she held up the head of his second, Xenia. Then, with her other hand, she launched something. Retsov jerked the book in front of her face and heard the thwack of 3 bone shards lodging themselves in the leather binding. Jorah, Retsov said, voice flat, have a quick look for other survivors, then prepare to leave. We won't be returning to the ship. Leave, Colonel? Jorah's voice cracked. How? Where? Retsov ignored the question and opened the Balcaris to the page she had found during her flight. Gulsithar, Rameus, Tanustovan, Quadranis, Athrotas, Har. Her voice boomed out into the darkness, and the words seemed to hang in the night air. The lower decks of the river god lit in a brilliant red. The ship creaked horribly before its fore exploded entirely. The elves bashing down the door were thrown backwards, ravaged by flame and pincushioned by wooden splinters. The woman on the railing looked backwards and swan-dived in the river. Into the night rose 2 dragons, swooping and whirling in the light of the flaming ship. They weren't massive, but each could carry 4 human-sized creatures with ease. Tolasian Rasatra, Retsov yelled, triumphant, and the beasts turned their heads and began to weave their way towards her through the night. Silversteel, Retsov grinned, prepare to depart. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and come back for the next story, story number 17, Missile, by Russell Franz.